Awesome. Thank you, everyone, for joining. I have often heard people say that they're not even sure they could get into the university that they went to if they applied today. I often wonder that about Bain for me too. It's become increasingly competitive, but my love for the firm has only grown over the years. So I'm really excited to have Keith here. We're going to get into some pretty serious shenanigans on the call today, but our goal is 100% truth, super insightful conversation and a real deep dive into some nuance about what the heck is happening in the hiring landscape in general and how Bain is positioned inside there. So, Keith, I'm going to go ahead and just kick off by welcoming you to the pod and also reading a bio from you. So, correct me if
Okay.
anything is wrong in here. It always feels a little bit odd for me to read this while you're here. It's like,
I know.
right? This is your bio, Keith, but here we go. I'm going to get into it. So, Keith Bevans is a partner at Bain and Company and EVP of Global Recruiting. Over his over 25 years at Bain, he's worn many hats, from advising Fortune 500 clients on performance improvement to leading global recruiting strategy across MBA, advanced degree, and industry channels. Today, he oversees a 70-person team responsible for bringing top talent into Bain, and he works closely with senior leadership on everything from talent tech to onboarding. He's also a proud MIT and Harvard Business School alum, and we're thrilled to welcome him back to Strategy Simplified for the fourth time. Thank you so much for joining us, Keith. Excited that you're here.
Thank you. It's good to be back. Keep having me back.
So,
I'll have to
you
try harder this
betcha.
time.
Let's go. Let's go. This is wild
Let's do
time.
it.
So, first of all, a lot of people will hear you for the first time on this pod. So, can you
Yeah,
just give a quick snapshot into your role, which has become
sure.
increasingly systematized, but also remains very personal, leading Bain's global consulting recruiting team? What does that actually look like from the inside?
Yeah, so the way we're structured actually helps clarify a little bit. The way I think about it, the easiest way to think about it is a little bit of a matrix because why keep it simple? There's three regional leaders. There is APAC, EMEA, and the Americas. And then there are four channel leaders. There's basically playing a little bit loose with the language, associate consultant, consultant, experienced talent recruiting, which is all the non-consulting staff, and leadership recruiting, which is effectively partner hiring. So again, playing a little bit loose with the language. So you have sort of three regions and four sources. And then below that matrix, you have 8 centers of excellence. So those are things like assessments or marketing or operations, but there's 8 centers of excellence that support the entire matrix. So there's things that everybody needs, like marketing, or things that everybody needs, like assessments. We put those into global centers of excellence. I currently lead the consulting sort of channel, which is MBA, advanced degree, lateral hires that come in as consultants. And I also lead the 8 global centers of excellence. So I'm sort of involved in all of our recruiting globally. But when I focus mostly on, consultant, MBA, PhD hiring.
Look, Keith, everybody has a number for retirement. I don't
Yes.
have a number though. I have a
Okay.
moment when everybody in the industry can get their freaking act together and decide what to call each of the levels so that everyone can understand what the
And we're
heck it
done.
is, right? I'm like, that's the day that I retire. I'm
You
done.
will
My
work
my
for you
work has
will work forever, Jenny.
I know. I think it's kind of just an excuse to stay in my working years,
Yes,
but
yes.
anyhow, that was incredibly clear and also super confusing. So well done. I
Yeah,
think you've accomplished your first check mark of the
good. I can come back
conversation.
next year.
Yeah, seriously. So let's kick off just by talking about a little
Okay.
bit about what's new at Bain in 2025, right? What's shaping the way that you think about the business? We love the lens of talent because it tells you so much about
Yeah.
not just today but also the future. And you can go bigger than talent, though, right? People, clients,
Yeah.
how the firm is operating. If somebody hasn't checked in the last year or two, or even in the last 6 months, what's new right now?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing is probably, the pace of innovation has accelerated. It was already very fast at Bain, from when you were here, and the pace has just gotten faster. I mean, the cycle time to get things done, it's just faster than it's ever been. I think what's really neat is that you know the tools are changing, but that's not really the secret sauce for us. The parts that stay the same are the way we work and the strengths that we lean on. How we get things done is a little bit different. For us, we are more than ever working in integrated teams. So it's not just that there's a consulting team and then there's this analytics group over here and a design group over there. They're actually the case team. So the standard case team that you will have seen when you were here, or that I saw when I was on the consulting side of the house, where it's like a manager, two associate consultants, two consultants, and then they just go do anything. It's very different now. It'll be a manager, a consultant, an AC, and a data scientist, and an innovation expert, or a product designer. A lot of times now our teams will have developers on there. When I was an AC, I tell this a lot, but it's true. Like when I was an AC, we would leave clients with an Excel spreadsheet model and say we built a tool for them. And to make sure they didn't break it, we would lock some of the cells. Like that was our big, aha, we've got this. Um, Now we'll actually, have our developers code up an app and leave them with a working app or working piece of software. And that's just a very different way of doing things. And it sort of raises the stakes for how well you work with an integrated team. Because it's not that I send it off somewhere and they develop it and then I come back and I get feedback. It's we're actually going to sit side by side. If we're building an app for store associates in a retail environment, let's go walk the store together. Me looking at it through the strategy lens and you looking at it through the technology lens, so that when you build that application for the frontline sales force, we both have a common understanding of what challenges they're facing are. That is very different. And the last thing that's been exciting for us in the last several years, I wouldn't say that it's new this year by any stretch, but we have an entire ecosystem of partners that we're bringing to bear. So I mentioned the integrated teams and the different groups at Bain that we bring in, but we have a huge network of external partners that allow us to get sort of the best tools for the task on every project that we're working on. We're not trying to build everything ourselves. Some firms do that. Good luck to them. But we've had partnerships before ChatGPT was a thing. We were partnered with OpenAI, right? We're partnered with AWS. We're partnered with Microsoft. We're partnered with Salesforce. So depending on what problems our clients are facing, we can always bring sort of the best solution that's in the market to them. Because again, the tool isn't the answer. The tool is part of the answer. Knowing how to use the tool is the answer, and knowing how to get your entire organization globally of oftentimes tens of thousands of people to do something differently, that's the hard part. The tool is just helping you get there.
So Keith, I work in both the digital world and also in the physical world.
Mhm.
And the physical world is hard to disrupt, right? Housing, rentals,
Yeah.
power, wine. But like in this year, right, in 2025, can you just tell me, why are people hiring consultants at all? And why specifically are they hiring Bain? Like, what is Bain's value proposition in 2025?
Well, I think it's a similar value proposition to our clients and our employees, but they are different in some ways. The first part of your question was, why are they hiring consulting? It's always been interesting to me because, again, playing a little bit loose with the language, it sort of hits regardless of the economic cycle, right? When times, and I've been here now 29 years, so almost 30. I'll have to update the bio soon.
25 plus. Yeah, is
25
it,
plus
you
is
can
a
keep it
safe
at
way to do
25
it.
plus forever. Yeah, totally.
25 plus is a good way to do it. But, I've now been here through multiple cycles. We had the dot-com crash, we had the bubble, we had the housing crash, we had, so I've seen it a lot. And what happens is when times are great and money is literally growing on trees and investors are throwing money into the market, the question is, where do we invest? Like there's too many opportunities. We don't know which one to bet on. And so we get called in to help companies figure out where to invest to grow. On the flip side, when the economy slows down, there's a lot more effort on like, we need to do a strategic retreat in certain areas. How do we cut back and not hit an artery and prevent our growth when things turn back around? How do we strategically retreat in a way that's smart, that doesn't hinder our long-term prospects? So we sort of get different types of work, but our phone rings in either market. And I think now, because I haven't checked, X, in the last 20 minutes, which I don't really use it anymore, but like in times of uncertainty, we tend to be really helpful for companies that are figuring out, what are the things that I can do today that I won't regret? What are the no regrets moves that my company should be doing? And I don't know if anybody's been keeping up with the news, but things are changing every day based on, what gets posted on social media, apparently, is how we're running the country now. And so in that environment, companies are looking for ways to navigate it in a way that makes sense, and they call us to help them with that. So that's why they call consultants. It's we help them in times of uncertainty, and it's never been more uncertain than now.
I love it. I think it's fascinating because one of the questions is around AI fundamentally changing the consulting model.
Yeah.
AI doesn't provide certainty, though, does it, Keith?
No, I actually, for kicks, maybe a year ago, asked ChatGPT who is Keith Bevans. And I'll tell you, the Keith Bevans that they knew was phenomenal. I had worked at all kinds of companies. I had done all kinds of stuff. And I was like, and my bio's online. Like, geez, what is it doing? It's gotten better now. But it is interesting to know that it is a tool. It does need to be verified. It changes the nature of the work in some important ways, though. When I was in AC, finding the data was the problem. Like if you had the data, you were significantly ahead of the competition as a company. And then sometime while I was in AC, a company named Google launched. We were like, oh, there goes the job. We have no job anymore,
The
right?
death of consulting, Keith.
Yeah, the death of, yeah, here goes the death of consulting article, 1998 or whenever it was. Um, and the truth is that the nature of the work changes. And so now I think AI and other tools like that are helping teams get to answers faster. But the answer isn't the hard part, as I said earlier. The answer is you need it. You need a good answer and you need a right answer. And you need a team that can understand when the AI is hallucinating and when it's not. You need a team that can actually say, well, yeah, it did see that online, but it saw it on like a social media post. That's not a fact. Like you can't cite that in your bibliography any more than you could use that in a paper you're writing for school, right? And so you need people who can use a discerning eye and understand how the AI works and what it's capable of. But once you have that answer, you still need a way of deploying it across an organization and driving change. And that's where Bain is very different. And I think that's the value proposition for our clients to the first part of your last question, which is, clients hire Bain because Bain can work top to bottom through their organization in a way that other firms can't. And it has a lot to do with the people that we hire and the humility we approach the job with, right? I don't lead with my degrees. I don't lead with the fact that I just spoke with the CEO. I lead with the fact that I have a really great team and I respect your experience. And together we'll get to a better answer. That is uniquely different than other firms people are considering. On the employee side, the value proposition really has not changed. What do you get when you join a firm like Bain? Well, you get to show up for work every day with a purpose. And that purpose is about the impact that you're having for our clients, both as individual executives and as companies, right? You get to work at a place where you can thrive. And we want you to be a healthy, whole person, not just a brain on a stick that can use Excel, which I guess would be weird with no hands if you were a stick, but you get the metaphor, right? There's also like rewards and recognition. I think the people that we hire work hard and they want to be recognized for that and they want to be acknowledged for that, not just by applause in a Zoom call, but like with financial compensation, with career growth. And we also want people to learn and we want them to grow as executives. Not everybody's going to stay at Bain as long as I have, but I want everybody's time at Bain to be additive to their career because one day I want to talk about that person being an alum. Hello, Jenny. And I want to talk about the great things that they're doing. Those four things make up our employee value proposition. When you get the people that really resonate with that, you get great results for your clients. It's a great cycle that we've been in for the last 52 years.
So I want to just say one thing. It sounds like if I'm going to summarize, see if I heard this wrong.
Okay.
What we're saying is that consulting remains relevant because I'm gonna ask you a follow-up question that's like probing a
Sure.
little bit, right? But
Sure, sure.
consulting remains relevant as long as businesses have either a slate of great decisions to make or a series of hard decisions to make, which
Yes.
they almost always have, right? Like there is
Yeah.
there and that is something that AI cannot do for them. It cannot make those decisions. It can inform decisions, but it cannot make the decisions. It can't recommend decisions, and it can't think from a 3D or 4D perspective when it's looking at that decision. Did I hear you right on that?
Yes. And I would say not yet. We'll see. We'll see what happens next year with AI. But it is
2026, we'll be back on the pod.
exactly, or we won't be. Maybe it'll just be an avatar talking for me.
Yeah.
But I would say that it is a more powerful tool. I think this time and this technology advance feels different, materially different than when I was here for the app ecosystem or Google or advanced analytics and big data and all of those things. This feels
Machine learning.
materially
Yeah,
different.
exactly.
This feels
Mhm.
very different. But again, I think it accelerates parts of the curve, but the hard part is actually doing the work.
Can
Everybody here has
you,
ChatGPT on their computer, but
I know it's
not going to
true.
get them through.
I'm going to ask you another question about that
Sure.
in
Okay.
interviews in a hot second. But right now, I got an email about 4 weeks
Uh,
ago from somebody who I've been advising over the last couple of years. And this email struck me because it was different in tone than one that I'd heard before. And it asked, I'm just questioning whether, and they weren't working at Bain, but they were working at a significant branded firm, right? They were like, I'm questioning whether the skill set that I'm learning here is
mhm.
relevant for the future. So my question for you is, are you seeing more people look outside of consulting? Has your competitive set changed in terms of what they're looking at? Before when I was recruiting, it was kind of like a little bit of banking, a
Yeah.
lot of McKinsey and BCG, right?
Ooh,
But what
ooh,
is
you
that competitive
mentioned
set
their
right now?
names on our call, Jenny. Come on.
I know it's so
Anyway,
rude,
what are we
right?
doing?
The
The
dark stars. It's all
I
right. We've got
see.
it.
No, the look, is the skill set relevant? I think there's a couple of different things that I would say to react to what you said. One, the demand for what I'm seeing has never been higher. And maybe that's because the market's a little bit slower, seemingly, or we're coming out of a little bit of a slump in the market. But when that happens, people apply to everything. So from an application standpoint, nothing I've seen and nothing my teams are telling me would lead us to believe that there's a problem there. Um, Quite the opposite, actually. Um, and so the interest in consulting seems to be very high. I look at it for a lot of our core campuses, especially the MBA schools that I'm responsible for, and we look at it over multiple years, and it goes up and down, and it's a little bit lower now, but I would say that it was probably artificially higher a few years ago. So I'm not seeing anything there. What is true all the time, Jenny, is that 90% of the people that get an offer from Bain and that do not take it, which is few, but the ones who don't stay in consulting. We know where they go, and we can always look them up online if we want to do the complete look later. So I would say that people who go into our process and get through our process are going to do consulting. They will either do it at Bain or they will do it at one of our competitors. And so from that perspective, no. I would say before the last crash, so before COVID, there was a lot more pressure that we were feeling from, Facebook, Amazon, Netflix, Google, like those types of firms. Um, I'm not seeing that same thing today. So that I don't think the interest is a challenge. I don't know if that's encouraging or discouraging to people on the call. It's a bigger
So that's
denominator of people applying.
and that's super interesting on the inbound. Can we also just finish that thought with outbound? Where are people going after?
All of the above. I think Bain is very different because we believe that we're training, future general managers. And that might mean that you're an executive director at a nonprofit. That might mean you're in the C-suite at a Fortune 500. But because of the way we train our people, you see a lot more people at Bain go into private equity. You see a lot more people at Bain go into things that are entrepreneurial or go to startups. We're not just training people to operate and function and be effective at giant, massive corporations. Our people can clearly do that. I mean, we've had every firm can point to a page of alums that's great. But I think what you see at Bain people and the way we train people to be general managers, you see a much more diverse range of options on the back end, and that's what our alumni network reflects. So it's really great.
Love it.
What was the second part of your question, though? I
No,
forgot.
no, that
Uh,
was it. It was just like, where are they going when
oh,
they
and the
leave,
skill set,
right?
and the skill set being relevant. Like,
Yeah,
in what scenario?
same skill set though, basically, is what you're saying, right?
Yeah, I mean, in what scenario is not knowing what's important, how to break it down into pieces that you can actually tackle it, and then mobilizing a team to tackle those problems? And what job are people looking for where that's not going to be important? I'm not sure. So I think it's still relevant,
I love
but
it.
maybe somebody will text me later and tell me. Please don't text me later.
That's what we're looking
Please,
for.
please don't text me later and tell me.
Yeah, please don't text. Please don't
Oh,
text.
okay.
So let's talk a little bit about Bain's recruiting function.
Yeah,
The first time we met was during the pandemic, and it was kind of like there was carnage all over the industry, right? People were pulling back their summers. I think Bain kept your summer
we
hires, but
did
like they basically did like some pretend work and some real work. I can't even remember what was happening.
all real work.
Um, right? It was all real work. Okay,
It was.
true.
It was.
Yeah, so but anyhow, it was this like really fascinating time. That was our first time that we met, you and I.
Yeah.
But then since the pandemic, just what is the one single thing that you've noticed that is different about the recruiting function now versus what was happening both pre-pandemic and during the pandemic?
I mean, the recruiting function. Let's internally, a lot more. We're able to reach a lot more people online, and so we can have a much broader reach in a lot of ways. Technologies like the one we're using today have democratized the process a lot. There's some physical constraints as to how many campuses you can go to in a year. And now I can go to a bunch of campuses at once because I'm doing them all on Zoom from right where I'm sitting. And so that's one way that the actual process and mechanics has changed. And I think, the pandemic helped that and gave a lot of people permission and familiarity with how to do things effectively online. It's not a substitute. We are still going in person. We're going to do more in person as well. But at the very basic level, we can now reach a lot more people in ways that we couldn't before. I think the other thing that has changed is we're looking for people that are, I would say, rapid adopters. I don't need people that are on like the bleeding edge of innovation and trying things that are, totally crazy from a technology standpoint. But I need people that can incorporate technology into their day to day somewhat smoothly. And it shouldn't be very disruptive when the technology changes for them or there's a new tool that might change the way they do the job. And so we're looking for people, we refer to it internally as sort of bilingual. I need the business fluency and the tech fluency from all of our folks. I think most people on campus today are getting that because I watch my sons do college and do their professional life, and that's just how it is nowadays. Yet, half the people on this call will still put Microsoft Office on their resume as a skill. Like most elementary school kids aren't using word processors these days, but okay. We'll pretend that's still a skill that's relevant for your resume. But I think that there are a bunch of people who really are learning, coding different tools, learning how to use different parts of technology in creative ways. And we're looking for people that can do that because that's the tools of the job now. The fact that you can use Word, like, yeah, I'm going to assume that's possible because I'm reading your resume that you clearly didn't handwrite, right?
Exactly. I mean, we're getting hired at Management Consulted to come in and help organizations help people communicate.
Yeah,
So, right. So like the business fluency and the communication piece of it, the what we would have formerly considered soft skills, I don't think are really that soft anymore. They're kind of table stakes.
they are. And I don't fault, I think that we have tools internally that we've developed and other tools, people helping their writing style get better, or drafting their emails get better. But at the end of the day, it is still a very relationship driven business. And when you sit across from a CEO and you ask her what her biggest problem is, or she has a problem on your mind, like you can't say, well, can I have 3 minutes to collect my thoughts and then take out your phone and ask ChatGPT? Like that's not a thing. You have to be able to actually engage with somebody in person like a human being. It turns out that still matters.
I love it. I wish I'm gonna play this for my kids later. I mean, my oldest
They're
is
not going to
12,
listen.
but
I can spoiler alert. Spoiler. Maybe I'll call them.
that's right, Uncle Keith. I'm gonna call Uncle Keith. Um, so let's talk a little bit about hiring targets,
Sure.
right? Where first of all, I think there's this sense, I think it would be helpful just to push into the nuance that you just mentioned of
Yeah.
like we can democratize the hiring process.
Hmm.
But Bain doesn't consider every application equally still, right? So like what are some of the factors that you're still looking at or the lenses that you're looking at? You still go onto campuses for a reason. It might be helpful for people to understand that because I think
Yeah.
sometimes they're kind of like, well, I can do anything from anywhere and have whatever grades and it doesn't matter. And I think it's like I know that that's not true. So it'd be helpful just for you to say
I'm
it from
sure
Uncle
there are
Keith's
jobs where that
mouth.
is true. And so good luck to them. That is very true somewhere. That is correct. Probably not here. Look, I do think that as best we can, we are reviewing every application, believe it or not. That is something that we take a lot of pride in. Does it always happen? No, but that's always the goal, because we know that not everybody had the same opportunities to go different places. And although a lot of some of the elite schools now are offering free tuition, I know my alma mater is doing that for people under a certain income threshold and even covering living expenses if you're at an even lower threshold. That doesn't change the fact that a lot of people have options where they can go to school, maybe at a place we don't recruit, but go for free. And that would have a meaningful change in the trajectory of their family. And so we understand that. And we understand that that person who had the grit to work, 20 hours a week while maintaining a great GPA at a school that we may not focus on as much probably has what it takes because something will go wrong at work and they'll be like, this isn't the hardest thing I've done. I've been here before. And so I do think that we try and look, across the board. Our hiring, I guess the easiest way to say it is we're open for business. A lot of people know because a lot of people DM'd me that we did a pretty big push in the spring of this year. For the back half of this year, in most of our markets, we have the class of 25 graduates joining. So we're not actively looking to add lateral hires right now because we have the people that we just hired starting right now. In fact, I think we had a group start today or yesterday. I'm forgetting the days of the week now. But like our
It's
intern
Tuesday,
class.
but it's usually me, Keith. So today it
Oh
can
my
be you.
God. Oh my goodness. But I know that our intern plans for next year are even higher than they are this year, which is a good sign. But you don't have to intern at Bain to work at Bain full time. And the other thing I'd encourage people to do is I think they just forget that we have a lot of non-traditional, some some non-consulting roles that aren't what people traditionally think of when they think of coming to work at Bain. And we have people, like I said, we have all those people I talked about, like we have to hire them from somewhere, whether that's data scientists or innovation experts or designers or developers or software engineers. Like we have all of those people at Bain as well. And the way I described it is right, which is the you come to Bain to do that type of work, one, because you want to have an impact with the work that you're doing. You don't just want to code mindlessly at some, multi-billion dollar company where you never actually see anything happen. The people that join Bain in those areas are actually doing work with our client teams a lot of the time. And so they get to continually stay on the cutting edge of their particular industry or their particular niche because they're working with clients on those issues. And so I think people sometimes look a little bit too narrow at the different types of opportunities that we can provide to folks. And that's one thing that I wish more people knew, because the team that does the hiring for them is always looking for great people all over the world.
This is a trick question, but are
Okay.
you clear at Bain, you feel on because it's very clear that if you're an AC or if you're a consultant,
Mhm.
that you're going to be client facing. But I know
Mhm.
for a lot of people, that's a big determining factor of what they
Yeah.
want to do. Are you clear about whether a role is client facing or not?
Yeah, it's usually in the job spec, because we have software developers developing things inside Bain for Bain, and we have people that are doing it for clients. There's some overlap, but it tends to be clearer in the spec. And Jenny Ray, it's travel expectations, it's all the things that come with the job. But again, I just think people generally think about Bain and say, well, I can be an AC or I can be a consultant, and they forget the dozens of other roles that have professional, very experienced professionals with great career paths here. In fact,
Awesome.
I switched to one of those tracks when I moved over to the recruiting side.
Why did you do the spring push? And will you do it again?
Um, yes. So yes, we will. We're currently in planning to do that, probably starting the applications in the fourth quarter of this year, looking to interview probably in the fourth quarter and early in the first quarter of next year for start dates, in the March, April timeframe. Look, it makes it easier for us to align the business need with the capacity that we have. In a world where most of our interns, I would say the offer rate, I expect every intern that comes to Bain to get an offer. That's the point, right? We want to coach you, we want to develop you, we want to apprentice you, and we want you to come join us when you graduate. Um, but that effectively means that if I interview a first year MBA in January, and they're going to graduate 18 months later and start 4 months after that, I'm effectively locking in capacity 22 months in advance. And I don't know about you, but nobody really grocery shops a month in advance. So why would that make sense here any more than it
An
makes sense for
hour in
people
advance is what I'm getting to,
an
Keith.
hour
That's
in
like my
advance? Yeah.
perfect zone. Yeah.
So for us, we'll still do a lot of campus hiring, and we'll still have, the internship programs and all of those things. But having a portion of our capacity that we can sort of tie more closely to the demand and have people start when we need them to start, is just smart for business. And it provides other on-ramps for people who may or may not have been successful when they were on campus, or they might have gone to do something else and decided, wow, that wasn't as great as I thought. Maybe I should be talking to Bain and talking to consultants, and that's great.
Building my own consulting firm in South Africa is how I came to Bain. So sometimes it takes you a little bit of
There you go.
skin knees to figure it
Yeah.
out,
Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
Um, we talked already a little bit about tapping non-traditional backgrounds.
Hmm.
But you mentioned that you guys do an actual review of everybody that comes
That's
through.
right. Yeah.
Do you still have a couple favorites, right? Or just like, come on, guys, like if you're this, it's better than that, right? I think everybody says you could be anything, but I think it's helpful for people to know like what are you actually looking at in a world where you could be anything and you could come to Bain doing anything. What are
So
you
look,
actually preferring?
there's a couple things that we look for on resumes. I think when I think of even the diversity of my class when I started almost 30 years ago, and I look at who was like in that class photo, we took a class photo at the holiday party. Like I look at the backgrounds of those folks, and there's not a single like archetype, despite
Box.
what I read
Mhm.
online. Like I'm online, I see it. I'm like, wow, that's great. It's like fan fiction for Bain. Um, but the idea here is that the characteristics are what we're most interested in, right? I usually say that Bain people tend to be really so there's some baseline stuff like, are you smart? Like your major, your GPA, like the school, like what are you actually doing in the classroom? Like do you have the intellectual ability to do the role? And a lot of people do. But then there's the leadership. Can you make it happen? When you've been the leader of an organization, I think about myself, on campus, being president of an organization, like things go wrong. You're organizing a conference, the speaker's plane gets delayed, and now you need to come up with plan B. Well, that turns out to be a lot like client services. Like things just happen, Are you going to freeze, or do you have a history of demonstrating that you can get things done? And then we look for that team player and that collaborator. And so we're looking at a bunch of different things on the resume. Here's an interesting one that people usually when they send me their resumes, which I don't appreciate all the time. Um, they usually ask me for feedback, and one of the things that I notice on people's resumes is they tell me a lot about what they did. I'm like, I don't care what you did because I'm not hiring you to do that. I'm hiring you to be a consultant, right? Like telling me what you did on your job isn't the same as telling me that you were actually good at your job. Like there's a
It's a
quarterback for the
great
Chicago
distinction.
Bears, that's on his resume, but they're not very good. They have a losing record. Like they're not good. So what I'm looking for is somebody to tell me that they did something and tell me what impact it had and tell me why their contribution to the team actually made a difference. And what's interesting is not only does it tell me they were good at what they're doing, but it tells me that they're already thinking about doing things to have an impact, which is what Bain is about. It's one of our operating principles. So in the way they talk about their work, I can already just read whether or not they're going to be a good fit here. Are they just coming in to do stuff, or are they coming in to get stuff done? There's a difference. It's subtle, but you can read it in the resume. And so when I'm looking at resumes, I'm looking at all of those things because I think it tells me a little bit about who folks are. And you can demonstrate that regardless of where you're coming from and regardless of your background. If you can do a little bit, if you can do a lot with a little bit, I can only imagine what you could do if we put you in Bain's ecosystem.
Keith, have you ever read a resume and just been like, we're hiring this person, it's happening?
It definitely wasn't mine. Um, I haven't because there's more to the resume, right? It's the person. I've also had the benefit of going to a lot of great schools, depending on who you ask, and seeing that there are a lot of people there who clearly got in on their resume using that mentality. Can I just say it like that? Because I just had my reunion. I don't want to incriminate myself or anyone else.
You can say
Okay,
it just like that, Keith.
leave it just
I'm
like
like, we
that.
should just end the call right now.
We'll all
We're
kind
just
of know what I mean.
throwing flames out left and
The,
right.
the resume is only part of the story. And like I said, at the end of the day, the resume might get you in the C-suite, but when the CEO asks you what's going on, she's going to want to hear an answer, and it's go time.
Yep.
And that's really important.
Talk to us about referrals. I hear I hear that you love DMs. Do you want everybody to DM you after this call, Keith? Is that what you want to have us
No, don't
do?
send me LinkedIn requests either. The although I think when you posted this, a lot of people did.
We didn't
The
tell them to. That's
the
why I'm
referral, the
asking straight from the
referrals are
horse's mouth.
fascinating. Jenny, the referrals thing is fascinating because I do end up seeing. I'm on Reddit as Keith from Bain, and there's always a thread like every other year, so every 6 months, let's say 6 to 12 months, there's a thread on referrals. And it ranges from people saying like, can anybody give me a referral to XYZ firm? Or, I had a referral and it didn't work out. What's going on? Look, the referral process is kind of like, first of all, it's not a big deal. It's not like you can get a referral and people are like, well, we don't need to interview this person. We can just go ahead and bring them in because, Japheth said they were great. That's not how it works. That would be crazy. Like, that's not how you become a top firm after 52 years by just sort of, taking dudes off the street who have a referral because they knew somebody. And historically, from a diversity
There's no
perspective,
bro code. That's
there's
what
no
you're
broker,
saying.
despite maybe the history in the industry. But we know that diversity gets us better answers for our clients, and the referrals in an industry that traditionally lacks diversity on every dimension, including ethnic diversity. I say that as a black man who joined 30 years ago. Um, Referrals sort of people refer their friends, and that turns out not to be great all the time. And so one is you have to understand that referrals are helpful because we might find people that we wouldn't have found, but it's not a golden ticket. This isn't a game show. This isn't reality TV. You still have to perform in the interview and have like a credible story. A referral won't overcome your GPA. A referral won't overcome the fact that you don't do anything but play Xbox in your dorm, or that you've been, basically wasting your time professionally. Like that, it doesn't overcome that. The other thing I would say is that from a referral standpoint, um, it's kind of like getting a recommendation for school. Like a referral from somebody who really doesn't know you. Like, what are they gonna say? Katie, I'm gonna say, hey, Katie, Japheth, I got a referral for Japheth, and you say, oh, what do you know about him? I was like, I don't know. He wrote a really nice cold call email on LinkedIn. You should hire him, right? And so when people ask me out of the blue, Jenny, right, and they sort of say, hey, can you give me a referral? I'm like, I mean, I respond to everybody who reaches out. I say, no, I don't know you. But what would I say? I mean, like literally, like how do they think this works? And so there's a little bit of self-awareness, I think, that has to come into play. Like, kidding aside, there's a little bit of self-awareness. And if you think there's a different way,
I'm dying inside that people have written you that email.
they literally have, and they've gotten that response from me. I had somebody ask me if they could do the internal recruiting process instead, and I was like, but you're not internal. Like, what are you asking me? Like, what really are we doing this right now? And so I think that, but again, it's just data, and the self-awareness that they're lacking in that interaction is actually a bigger red flag for how they would behave with clients
Absolutely. Mhm.
than it is about our process. And that's the part that I think people are missing. The way they engage says a lot about, like, can I turn this person loose in a client? Because at Bain, I don't keep you locked up in the office. I want you to work with executives. I want you to work with the frontline team because that's where the insights come from. And if I can't trust you to engage with me on a cold call, how can I turn you loose on a client? That's crazy.
To be fair, there was one intern in our office who showed up in seersucker and flip-flops, and we did lock him up in the office for the summer and tell
Yes.
him that like we could not. Yeah.
Yeah.
But God, I love that guy. So, everything turned out all
Was
right
he
in
a
the end.
referral?
Oh, that's harsh, but I love it. I don't know, potentially. Probably wasn't as clued into the process then as I am now.
Okay.
So, yeah. Let's talk a little bit about a little bit more about the recruiting process.
Sure.
Can you use AI to build a resume? Can you use AI to build a cover letter? Does that help you? Does it hurt you? Mm.
So can you? Yes. If it embellishes your resume to the point that it did my bio, that's probably not going to help you. But I think I've seen my sons do it, and I think it actually makes meaningful suggestions. And I think that's fine. It's a tool that I expect people are using that. I don't expect to know if people are or they aren't. So if you think it helps you write a better cover letter, write a better resume, knock yourself out. Ultimately, though, you should go someplace where you think you can thrive. So I encourage people to be thoughtful about that. Like, if you don't think you can get through the process without a pretty big assist, how do you think it's going to go when you're here? Like, back to my Chicago Bears metaphor, like, if you don't belong on the football field before the game starts, is probably the time you should figure that out before you get crushed at the opening kickoff. Like, that would be a terrible idea. Um, so I
You're
expect
gonna
people,
get a lot of emails from Bears fans, Keith.
oh my
This is
God, but they wouldn't say I'm wrong. Um, the uh, the So Jenny, I think people should, use whatever tools they want. AI is basically like asking your roommate to proofread your cover letter, which we all did. It's just now you don't need to wake up your roommate. Um, in the interview, no, we don't want you using calculators, which we've always said, and we don't expect people to be using AI. Do I think people cheat? I think some people try. I think it's pretty obvious a lot of the time, and I think that it makes it challenging for people to excel when they're here. And so we ask people not to use AI during the interviews. We ask them that every single interview. And we expect that, in a world where we rely on trusting each other implicitly when we're here, we expect to be able to trust you on the front end as well.
I love it. That preempted my next question, so I'll skip over
Oh,
it. It was just you're cool with ChatGPT in the interview, right? Like you can just have the bot do the interview for you, and it's
I
totally
did
fine,
talk
right,
to a, I
Keith?
did talk to a friend of mine who is a Bain alum who's now at one of the business schools. He's the dean there, and he's convinced that they did an interview of a student, and it was actually an avatar AI, not even the real person, which I thought was pretty bold, I guess. I don't know how they thought that was going to work out, but
So they let
it,
him in, right? It's totally fine.
here we are. I did not ask him how it went, but they were like, that was pretty weird. That's not the same dude we, anyway, it's a whole nother, what a time to be
Oh,
alive.
yeah, comparing notes. I love this. So, any changes to Bain's process? Are you bringing back in-person cases? The Bain online test. What's the point of it? When does it happen? Can you just tell us a little bit about, right? Speaking of not using technology to assess candidates, but
Yeah,
actually
yeah,
using
yeah.
technology to assess candidates.
So some of the basics haven't really changed. Depending on the position you're interviewing for, on the consulting side and the office, you'll get some version of 1 or 2 rounds. You'll get some cases. You'll get an experience interview. Um, the experience interview is literally just about getting to know you. I did experience interviews last month, and there were people who had clearly rehearsed a script. And I asked one question, and I got like a 5-minute rant on a different answer. And I was like, "That's really interesting, but can we just talk for a minute?" Again, I'm thinking about how you'll be with clients. right? And can you actually engage as a
Not whether you got an A+ on the answer, but
I
whether the
mean, like,
interaction
yeah,
would be,
yeah,
I
the
like that
interact
person
that
more. Yeah.
that's actually what I'm testing in a lot of cases. Like, I just want to see, like, can you have a conversation? And the case interviews, we're talking about, we're doing them on Zoom. We've been doing them on Zoom. There'll probably be some in-person interviews in the next 12 months or so. We haven't quite figured that out yet. But we do think that it will help in a bunch of different ways. There is still a personal element to the job that requires you to actually like shake somebody's hand and look them in the eye in person and do all those things. And so that will continue to be a part of our process. The basics on the case interviews haven't really changed, and the difference between in-person cases and Zoom cases it's about the same. It's a little bit different, but not much. We actually have examples of both on our website. So if people want to see what the engagement is like, you can check that out. And then the online tests, I've gotten some great insight into the decisions that I apparently made on Reddit. I was like, that's interesting. How would you know that? Because I think I would decide that, and I haven't decided it. So
So what have you decided or not decided,
yeah,
Keith?
so be careful first of all, be careful what you read online. In the last several cycles, we were just trying to understand the tools. And so I think we told people that. And for the most part, we were just collecting the data alongside our regular process so that we could see how predictive things were, right? The way to see if these tools are effective is to actually just collect the data and see, did it tell you what the regular process told you and what can you take away and what can't you take away? So everybody who applies for a role at Bain, especially on the consulting staff, will get an online assessment. We're currently using two. You'll get one of those two. Um, you don't need to study for it. You don't need to freak out about it. For crying out loud, like, please stop posting screenshots on the forums asking for people to help. Because again, if you can't get in, it's not going to be great when you're here. But we are going to continue doing that. The important thing, though, in all seriousness, it is one data point. It is one data point. It is not a filter. There is not a pass-fail score. It is one data point, just like all the other data points on your resume. I mean, let's be clear. Like, my GPA probably wouldn't have got me through the screen. You talked about not being able to work at the firm that my GPA wouldn't have got me through the screen, but I had other things on my resume that Bain's process looked at and cared about. And the online assessments are just another data point in that same ecosystem of it just paints a more well-rounded picture of you.
I love it.
Okay.
Well, we're going to finish up with our side of it. And right now, I'll just invite everyone who's live on the call. If you've got questions for Keith, we have a couple of slots for Q&A at the end of this. Japheth is going to read them out, but we need you to post them in the chat. So you can also post them if you're on YouTube or LinkedIn as well. So if you've got questions, pop them in there. Keith, I want one hot take about the industry, right? Where is the industry going in the next 5 years? What are you thumbs up about? What are you a little bit shaky about?
Not
One hot take
shaking,
about the industry.
not shaking about much. Honestly, I don't know if it's a hot take because I've mentioned it already. But I do think that the answer will get easier to get to, and there'll be a lot more emphasis on firms' ability to drive change and mobilize organizations around like a common goal. I think that's always been what Bain has been focused on, but I think it's going to be more pronounced. And the difference between firms that can relate to an organization and sort of inspire people to do something different, there's going to be a premium on that. And that speaks to the type of people that we have to hire. You have to be smart enough to know what the answer is and to be able to check the AI and do all the analysis. But you have to have that, in addition to the IQ, you have to have the EQ to be able to go to somebody and say, look, I know you've been doing this for 10 years this way, but trust me, let's try this a different way. Oh, you have suggestions? Okay, well, let's try it this other way because actually the combination is better than what I came in with or what you were doing today. And I think that's going to be even more important than it's been in the past. And so, I don't think that's a hot take, but it is probably where things are heading.
At the end of our case competition training deck, the tagline of the slide is, "Your job is to inspire leaders to take risk to change."
That sums up.
Okay.
Well, why'd you ask me the question? You should have just said that.
No, because you said it better than I did. But that's it. Like
Yeah,
it's
I need you to write
right.
that down. Japheth,
It's
can
the
you
end.
email me that?
Yeah, seriously. Um,
Thank you.
uh, put that on a social media snippet, Japheth.
Exactly.
Let me get a little bit of airtime. Keith's so cool; it's hard to keep up. Keith, one of the things that you said that really made me think of something is like I'll ask in some of our presentations, and anybody who's been in one will know this. Like, what was the number one year for consulting revenues? Right? And the answer is last year. Like the most recent year is the largest year for consulting revenues in
That's what I
history.
was going to say.
And
I
then
was like,
I'll
yeah,
be like, what was the low point? And then I get a mixture of answers, right? Was it during COVID? Was it during the 2008 implosion? Was it during the dot-com burst? And it was like the first date recorded was basically the low point, right? Like this industry has
yeah,
grown and
yeah,
expanded and become more
yeah,
vital year over year. And so even with all of the conversation around the death of the industry, I think the question is the same question that the clients are asking, which is where is it moving and how do we make decisions to get
yeah,
there? Not is it going to grow, right? But it's just where is that growth coming from?
exactly.
Internally, for the folks that are on the call and listening afterwards, what's the best piece of advice for candidates preparing to apply to Bain in the weeks and months ahead? Right, just a couple of weeks from now, there's a deadline for
Yep.
undergrads.
Yep. I'll keep it
Beyond
quick.
that, MBAs.
There's two things. One, do events like this and do some of the other events. We do a lot online. It's not a popularity contest. At no point in our process do we say, well, how many people has this person spoken to? Okay, they're in, this person's out. Do enough so that you understand beyond the sort of basics. Like, yes, we're a consulting firm. Yes, we work in a lot of industries. Yes, we solve tough problems. But how does home office staffing affect your day to day? I don't have to travel Monday to a client if there are no meetings because the whole team is from one office. We can stay home and meet in the office because we're all in the same city, right? Like there's the opportunity when you're home office staffing to work with people multiple times throughout your career. Half of my first case team from 30 years ago is still here in the office. I just saw them Friday in a partner meeting, right? And so that has implications. And thinking about what that really feels like day to day beyond just the headlines on the website and really getting to that second and third order insight, that's important. And I think candidates should spend the time doing that. That's one. Two, prep for cases slowly, a little bit at a time, one a week over several weeks is better than trying to get 10 done over, Thanksgiving break or something like that if you're in the US. And you should actually enjoy that part of the process. That is a good indication of the job. So if you find that you're having, crazy sweats and heart racing and it's just not fun for you, maybe that's a sign consulting's not right for you either. Um, and then along those lines, just try and have fun with the process. Try not to stress too much, especially Jenny. A lot of the people that you're involved with and that'll be on here today have great backgrounds. And when you think about where society is right now, maybe you're being called to do something and have an impact on a world in a different place. So try not to extrapolate from one case interview on a Tuesday afternoon into what you'll be doing, 30 years from now. It's just one step along the journey, and you should try and enjoy the journey as best you can.
Maybe the next pod we should do, Keith, is like all the dumb decisions we made and how it still
Oh
ended
man,
up okay. Wouldn't that be a
there,
fun one?
there's not a podcast long enough, Jenny.
Okay, a couple quick fire questions, and we're going to
Yeah,
go to
let's do it.
to the chat as we close. Favorite Chicago restaurant to recommend to visiting candidates?
Okay, people that know me when I go to campus, the team always wants to go out and celebrate and go someplace nice. My rule is if it doesn't have paper napkins, it's too fancy for me. And so I would go to Jim's Original on Maxwell Street. I'd go to Yasa. I'd go to Uncle Joe's and get some jerk chicken. Yasa has great Senegalese food. But I would get into neighborhoods and eat some real food and leave the cloth napkins for when you're home.
Love it. But do you have cloth napkins at home?
No.
Okay, sure. I was that would have been a
I have them. I don't
mind-bending
use them.
shift in this call right now. Yeah. Yeah. I've got them for our fancy, do we call them fancy dinners?
Exactly, but then we don't use them.
Yeah, okay,
We have
fair.
fancy paper napkins.
If you weren't at Bain, what job would you try for a year?
Anybody who knows me for more than 20 minutes in person knows that I'm a pretty serious hobby photographer. It's probably not a hobby at this point. And so I would definitely be doing that. In fact, I took a sabbatical last year for 6 months, and my wife and I traveled to 16 countries over 6 months. And I took tens of thousands of photos, created a podcast and a separate website. So I learned how to code, I learned how to audio edit, I learned how to do a bunch of things. That's what I'd be doing. In fact, I put out an episode yesterday.
See, when I traveled around the world, I shaved my head and you were already one step ahead of me. So there you
There you go.
go.
There you go. And this may or may
Last
not have
one.
been me. It was natural.
Yeah. One win from the past year you're celebrating. Personal is
Okay,
fine.
so my wife and I had our 20-something anniversary, which was good. So we're celebrate that.
25th plus.
25th plus, 25, actually 25 plus for sure. But I did, in all seriousness, I did a project called My Home is Special for my sabbatical so that I wouldn't just sort of waste the time, like just traveling and seeing things, that I would actually create something that I thought needed to be created. And I took a few months off when I got back. And then in the fourth quarter last year, I decided to relaunch it with a slightly different concept. And we're closing in on 5,000 downloads, and I've kept it going since then. And the goal is to get people exposure to really interesting people outside of their immediate bubble. I have my corporate bubble, I have my MBA bubble, but because of my photography, I'm in a lot of other communities, and I'm giving people a glimpse into that. So I'm actually, the big win is that I've been able to keep that going now that I've been back over a year.
It's one of my favorite things about wine. I felt more connected to a community that I never was a part of before.
Exactly. Exactly.
Awesome. Okay, so let's go to the chat, Japheth. I know we're closing up at the top of
Yep.
the hour. Do we have three good questions that we
Rapid
could
fire. I'll do them
launch in
quick.
from the chat? Let's do it.
Okay.
Beautiful. All right, let's move quick. So we've got folks who are, at a non-target program, whether they went to a state school or something.
Yep.
Besides, working on their resume, what are let's just call like two to three high impact activities, clubs, etc., things like that they can do to kind of strengthen their profile.
At a lot of places, it's not even the school, it's the program. Find the business school on campus. A lot of times they have a consulting club that can help. There's a lot of online events they should take advantage of. And things like what you're doing, and there's other sort of what I'll call them aggregator organizations, because we may not be on your campus, but we may be at a career fair for a partner organization that brings together students from multiple campuses, and you'll see us there. And so there are ways to connect with us. Not a great way to connect is to like literally just cold call people or say, hey, can I come visit the office and things like that. So take advantage of what's online so that you can put your best application forward.
I love it. All right, thank you.
Yep.
And Keith, by the way,
Moving on.
afterwards, if there are feeds or places that you want us to point people to, we'll work
Sure.
with Angela on
Perfect.
that.
Thank you. Yep.
Do you actually look at the personal interest hobbies section on a resume, or is that just wasted space?
I do. First of all, I'm not screening a lot of resumes. I look to see if they have anything interesting that could calm their heart rate down when I'm interviewing them. So I'll talk about something they're comfortable with just to get the heart rate back to normal so that we can then have a normal conversation. So I can see your normal you, not your super anxious, sweaty palms you. And so I like that. And then I also like to see if they can focus on things that are important. Like I said, you should put your best stuff first down there. And when you say Microsoft Word is your first skill, I'm like, great. I will put you alongside the kindergartners that are applying because they're using it too.
All right, great.
You asked, David.
I did.
Okay, that's
Well,
the short answer.
Well, no, someone else asked. I'm just transferring to you.
Yep.
Okay. If
He takes no responsibility
Way to take
for
accountability, Jacob.
Yeah, totally. Now he's a guy who wrote a great LinkedIn cold email and took no accountability. How do you feel about that,
Exactly.
Keith? Yeah, totally.
Okay, what do you got? Last one, Jacob.
Yeah.
At what point post graduation does a candidate move from being like a campus hire to an experienced hire? Is there a line?
Well, because we usually hire, let's say in the fall of your last year at school, more or less once you graduate, you're probably going to be a lateral or industry hire, right? Because if you graduate in May and you're looking at us in June, the fact is people that are starting in June got their offers last September, so you're already more or less a year behind them. And because they're probably starting around that time, we wouldn't be looking at adding to the team for a little bit longer. So most of the time it's a lateral process. The real question is how much work experience would you need to have before you start thinking about, am I an associate consultant or should I actually be thinking about a consultant role? And that tends to be, I don't know, anywhere from 2 to 6 years, depending on what it is you're doing. And some people will go to other firms. Some people will do something totally different. So it really does vary. We try and take that on a case-by-case basis. But we do go back and say, well, where were you, 8 months ago with all of your peers? Calling me in May saying, hey, can I apply to Bain? I'm like, everybody on your campus sort of got the memo 8 months ago. Where were you? Which again, sometimes people have different things. My son had a startup in college and he wasn't looking to do anything but work on that, which is fine. but I am going to ask the question, so you probably want to have an answer. That's yours, not AI's.
Beautiful.
I love
Thanks,
it.
Keith. All right, January, over to you.
Thank you. Well, Keith, thank you for coming. It's exciting
Thanks
to
for
hear
having me
that
back.
Bain is increasing its targets for interns full time, full speed ahead.
Yep.
We're really excited that you're here. We'll do everything that we can to help people get the real insight
Thank you.
into the firm, and we really appreciate you coming on today. So thank you to everybody else who joined us. Thank you, Keith, and your team for lending you for an hour to our team and to our community. And we're really excited about the future of Bain. So thanks for keeping us posted on what you're working on.
No, thank you for having me, and thank you for letting us have a little bit of fun with these and not doing corporate speak for an hour.
Wasn't that corporate speak? I thought that was how we talk. I didn't even know.
Not us. It's a family meeting. You're an alum.
That's
All
right.
right.
Awesome. Thanks again,
Thank
Keith.
you.
Good luck, everybody.
Bye-bye.